In the late 1930s, Hollow Ridge Valley was known for wheat fields that glowed gold even under dying light. The townspeople said the land fed generations, but it also took from them. Children were warned to stay away from the old dying oak, but Twisted Tree, standing alone at the edge of the fields. They said someone once hung themselves from its crooked branch, and that on cold evenings, a black figure still clung to the bark, waiting. On an October afternoon, a group of children ran across the field after school, laughing, breathless, unaware that the wind had stopped around them. The birds vanished mid-flight, and under the tree, something darker than shadow slowly unfolded its shape. The record from 1938, still kept in the town's archives, mentions multiple sightings of an elongated black form with glowing embers for eyes, always appearing when children gathered near the fields. Eyewitnesses described it as weightless, cloaked in strips that moved without wind, as if drifting in time rather than air. Locals believed it was the spirit of the man who once owned all the land. Elias Thorne, his obsession with preserving his fields turned into madness. He cursed the valley with his last breath, vowing that no child would inherit what he never got to pass on. From that year on, families moved away one by one, not because of famine, not because of poverty, but because their children kept coming home pale, trembling, saying they saw someone watching from the tree who never blinked and never moved until the last child looked away. Even now, those who dare visit Hollow Ridge say the dying oak still stands, and something still leans from behind it, waiting for footsteps small enough to follow. By the winter of 1941, Hollow Ridge had become a near-deserted farming town. Its houses skeletal, and its roads covered in frost. Only a few families remained, holding on to the land out of loyalty, desperation, or denial. But whenever dusk fell, the valley took on a strange silence, thick and suffocating, as though the world held its breath for something unseen. That was when people began reporting the floating mourner. Children described it first, an upright figure suspended above the wheat, wrapped in long, ink-black layers that hid everything except its burning eyes. It didn't drift like a ghost or sway like a body in air. It ascended, silently, with a purpose only it understood. One night, 5 children wandered too far from home while chasing fireflies. They stopped laughing when the horizon itself seemed to rise. Behind them, over the fields, the mourner appeared. No footsteps, no wind, just a sudden presence, tall enough to blot out the dying sun. Historical reports say the creature followed the children without moving. Each time they stepped back, the distance between them and the figure shrank. The youngest child, barely 7, fainted from terror The others said the mourner was not looking at them, but through them, as if searching for something in their memories or measuring the weight of their fear. The parents found the children at the edge of the wheat field, shaking, speechless, their bodies cold as if pulled from a river. That winter, every family remaining finally abandoned Hollow Ridge. But travelers still claim that on nights when the sky burns orange before fading, they've seen a long black figure floating high above the abandoned roofs, watching, waiting, mourning something only it remembers. In the early 1950s, the government briefly attempted to repopulate Hollow Ridge Valley. They believed the stories were nothing more than rural superstition. They rebuilt houses, tilled the abandoned fields, and encouraged young families to settle. For a moment, Hollow Ridge breathed again. But one autumn evening, the children of the new settlers gathered to play in the field. As they ran, a strange chill swept over the valley. Sharp, sudden, unnatural. None of them understood why the golden sky dimmed or why the birds fled in a single violent burst. Then they saw it. A dark silhouette hovered above the wheat, motionless, tall enough to graze the low clouds. The children froze. Behind them, the townsfolk emerged, each one stopping instantly as they too saw the figure. Adults tried to shout, but felt their voices swallowed by the air. It was as if the entire landscape bowed to the creature's presence. Old journals from surviving witnesses describe the moment with striking consistency. The figure never moved, never breathed. Yet its presence crushed the atmosphere like a collapsing room. The children claimed they felt their names being pulled from their minds, as if the being was trying to remember who they were, or who they reminded it of. Historians later discovered a chilling detail. Every child present that day shared bloodlines with families who once lived in Hollow Ridge. It was as if the valley itself recognized them, and the spirit bound to it did too. The first gathering marked the beginning of Hollow Ridge's second abandonment, one far more urgent and irreversible than the first. Before the valley was cursed, Hollow Ridge had a woman known only as the caretaker. Records suggest she watched over the town's children during the Great Depression, guiding them through famine, storms, and sickness. But after Elias Thorne's death, she vanished. Some say into the woods, others say into grief. Decades later, long after the first spectral sightings, the children of the new settlers saw a figure approaching them across the wheat. But this time, it wasn't the mourner, it was her. Though older, though worn by time, the children recognized her instantly, despite never seeing her before. She moved with a strange calm, her hands gentle, her presence warm enough to push back the valley's unnatural cold. The hovering shadow above the tree did not move, but it watched. The caretaker gathered the children around her and whispered for them to leave the valley before nightfall. Her voice shook, as if fighting something inside her, something ancient and binding. Witnesses later said her eyes carried the weight of a promise she once broke or failed to keep. Behind her, the dark figure descended slowly, silent, patient, as though waiting for her to finish speaking. The children ran. The caretaker stayed. When the parents arrived, minutes later, she was gone. The shadow was gone, but the fields carried a lingering warmth, like a final goodbye. Some believe she sacrificed herself to delay the darkness once more. Others believe she simply reclaimed her place between the living and the dead, guarding the children she could never save. The sun was sinking behind the ridges when the children gathered one last time at the edge of the wheat. They wanted to leave Hollow Ridge forever, but something pulled them back. A whisper on the wind, a memory, or a presence calling from the sky. As they stood together, the mourner appeared again, rising slowly into the air, with a grace that felt almost ceremonial. The valley darkened around them, not with shadow, but with a heavy, suffocating gloom. The children held on to one another, trembling. What happened next remains the most documented event in Hollow Ridge's history. The air thickened. The temperature dropped. The world grew silent, as if the earth itself paused. Some children later claimed they saw visions, old farms burning, families fleeing, the caretaker crying beside a lifeless child. Others said the mourner spoke without moving its mouth, whispering feelings rather than words. Grief, regret, hunger. Researchers who studied the children years later found something chilling. Their stories matched perfectly, down to the smallest detail. Despite being interviewed alone, it was as though the valley had breathed into their minds. When the children finally broke free of the paralysis of fear, they ran to their parents, never looking back. The hovering figure slowly dissolved into the sky, its outline fading like smoke, absorbed by the twilight. That was the last known interaction between Hollow Ridge's children and the entity. But the valley never fully recovered. Even today, hikers swear that when the sun sets behind the western ridge, they can hear the soft echo of children crying, and a shadow rising above the fields, searching for the ones who escaped. By the late 1970s, Hollow Ridge was declared permanently uninhabited. Government surveys marked it as unsafe due to unexplained environmental anomalies, though unofficial notes mention far stranger causes. Travelers avoided it. Researchers feared it. Locals refused to speak its name aloud. But there were still those who dared to approach. A final photograph, grainy, underexposed, and anonymously submitted, shows a lone figure in a black cloak standing atop the jagged ridge overlooking the valley. The image became known as the Watcher of the Black Ridge. Legend says this was the spirit that haunted Hollow Ridge from the beginning. The restless remnant of Elias Thorne, cursed to stand guard over the land he died trying to protect. From the ridge, it could watch every path, every abandoned home, every forgotten memory buried beneath wheat and dirt. Some believe the Watcher guards the valley, preventing the darkness within from escaping. Others believe it waits for the day someone returns. Someone with the bloodline, the memory, or the innocence needed to break the curse. But the most unsettling theory comes from a researcher who studied the valley